Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hello and welcome along to this week's Blood Red podcast. Myself, Matt Addison, stepping in alongside Theo Squires. It's been a little while since I've done one of these, so do go easy on me. We will go through some of your questions as we go along. There's obviously the big story of David Coote as well to get into. A couple of other bits as well, Caoimhin Kelleher and Curtis Jones. But before we do get stuck in, of course, a reminder to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan. You can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and of course, there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link for that is in the podcast episode description box below.
So smooth, a very nice last-minute international call up that.
Yes, I was trying to work out actually how long it's been since I've hosted one of these.
I don't think you've done one in here, have you?
I possibly have, but it might have been about 18 months since that happened. So yeah, I've been thrown in during the international break with a few big hitters off, but I'm sure it will all go smoothly. Certainly a lot smoother than the week for some referees. Let's start with some questions. Regular listener and viewer Sanjay Mystery got in touch. Joe has passed those on to us, and we're going to start with those. If anybody's got any other questions as we go along as well, do let us know in the comments section. We've got those in front of us, and we will go through those as we go through the course of the show. But I'll throw it over to you, Theo. The first question is a tricky one, I think. It is something that I've tentatively been thinking about over the last few weeks, but not quite been able to put together the words. So let's see if you can. Do you think Klopp's Liverpool would have been performing as well as what Slot's Liverpool have done this season had there not been a change during the summer?
I think there's a nice balance to it at the moment in the fact that Klopp was looking tired. It's a long time to be at one club. So him leaving, someone else coming in, it's new ideas. You do get fresh energy from it. I think that has benefited Liverpool. It's allowed Liverpool to go under the radar a little bit. The fact that I know Mohamed Salah's done this interview this week where he's kicked off about being called an underdog, but it's allowed Liverpool to be underdogs in a title race. It's now they're top of the table because the others have slipped up, and you're still not going, they're properly favourites for the title. They're just allowed to go about their business quietly, whereas if Klopp was still in charge, you're really putting pressure on it, going, this is a massive opportunity. Liverpool have lost the title by a point twice before. They have to make it count this year. So there is that nice balance there. And it is nice seeing a tweak in formation, a tweak in style, a couple of players just looking like a breath of fresh air for them. Diaz performing of his Liverpool career. Konate's back to his best. Salah's just explosive. Gravenberch in that new position. It does help to have that freshness to it sometimes. We'll never know what would have happened if Klopp had stayed in charge. Maybe he's in that position. City slip up, Arsenal slip up. He gets that energy back. Liverpool have got the fire back in their belly. But it's certainly no bad thing that they have been able to start afresh. And we've seen so many clubs, when they have made that big change after a long time, it's fallen apart. For Liverpool to have done it seamlessly so far, that's kudos to the players, the coaches who have come in, the guys behind them, in the backroom staff and everything who've picked up the search, found Arne Slot, think this is the best one for our style. It is hard to say what would have happened if Klopp was still in charge, but it's just been really nice seeing them do so well under Arne Slot. It's probably too early to go Shankly to Paisley, but it's nice to be the exception to the rule of it all falls apart when the big legendary manager departs.
Yeah, it's nice to see that consistency, and it's nice to see something a little bit different as well. I know Arne Slot has said many times that he's doing exactly the same as what Jurgen Klopp was doing. There's no big changes, but I think it's fair to say there has been some stylistic changes.
It's the control of the games, isn't it? The control of play. Like Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, it was as quick as they could, start to finish. Players were getting tired. They were getting lots of injuries. The end of the season, they could tire out. And while it was probably more exciting to see than just putting your foot on the ball, slowing it down, it's given Liverpool that control where they can just flick a switch and really take games to sides. Like, keep it clean, keep it tight, get to half time, see the weaknesses, and then you just steamroll them second half. It certainly seems better suited to a league season. Like Klopp, obviously, we know how superb he was in Europe, for example. That style was perfect for the Champions League nights. You could see them going on lengthy runs in that competition, and we're yet to see what Arne Slot can do in knockout stages in Europe. But for a 38-game league season, that control of Slot being a bit more composed, it certainly seems to be working in Liverpool's favour.
That leads us on quite nicely to the second question, which says, not to denigrate performances to data, but do you think Liverpool have benefited from having maybe one or two easier home fixtures? When I read this question, I thought the obvious one that stands out, Nottingham Forest, was a home game. That didn't go so well, but it's probably fair to say that maybe one or two of the harder games that Liverpool have had, Arsenal maybe being the exception. You know, Chelsea and Villa have both been at home. Obviously, Leverkusen in the Champions League as well, they've been at home. Have Liverpool benefited, do you think, from maybe the home form, or have they played maybe enough matches now to think that the sample size away from home is big enough as well?
Also, they've won all but one game away from home, and if you look at the league table last year, the away form was what let them down. I think they were level, or they were superior actually to City and Arsenal at home last season. It's just they didn't get the points away from home, and they didn't get the points in those big six clashes. Whereas this season, they've not lost to Arsenal. They lose one game to Forest, but let's be honest, it would be a massive surprise if Forest are still in the race for top four come May. And you get in the away results over a league season, that's what you need to see. It was a surprise. It was disappointing when Liverpool lost to Forest, but it's the only real setback they've had so far, and I think they needed that. Like, you look at some of the games, Brighton, for example, it would have been easy for Liverpool's heads to drop in that going, we're not going to be able to turn this around, and it just goes out with a whimper. But they had that experience of Forest. The fans knew what had happened earlier in the day, I think, or the weekend with City and Arsenal, so they could all pick it up. Like, there is a sense at the moment that it's an opportunity for Liverpool to do something special this season, and Anfield atmosphere has certainly risen in these 3 weeks. You say easy fixtures. Well, look at the league table, and they've still played a lot of the big sides, or the sides at the top of the table. And when they've got City coming up, you've got to play everyone twice, all that sort of blah, blah, blah stuff. They're still getting the results here. And you say you lose one game, you draw one game, and that's away at Arsenal, you bite your hands off there. It's just a great start. It's something that we didn't expect, not really seen before.
Yeah, it's a cliche to say that there's no easy games in the Premier League, but I think when you are winning so many, I think it's 15 out of 17, isn't it? They've won so far in all competitions. Okay, some of those games you would expect Liverpool to win, but when it's across a period that long, it's not necessarily quite as
3-4 months now, isn't it? And you look at the games where City have slipped up, where Arsenal have slipped up.
Yeah.
Both lost away at Bournemouth.
Yeah.
City have just lost at Brighton a week after Liverpool have beaten them home and away in Cup and League. That's showing there are some smaller teams, less fancy teams, who are picking up the results, who are at the top end of the table, like Brighton, like Forest. It is just a very inconsistent league season at the moment, apart from Liverpool at the top. That's why it's 5 points clear of City, 9 points at least of everyone else. It's a big gap. Hopefully they'll make it a bit bigger when they play City in a couple of weeks. City have got Tottenham, when Liverpool got Southampton away, first versus bottom. It's starting to shape up quite nicely. I
think Arsenal playing Nottingham Forest as well the day before, which isn't going to be,
and that's when they've slipped up in before as well, I think.
Yeah, so as we say, no easy games, but I think that is literally true in the Premier League, and that's how you win titles, isn't it? You beat the bottom 14 or whatever it is, and then see what you can do in the other matches as well. A couple of other questions. Favourite moment of the season so far, I think, is pretty hard, partly because it's been quite consistent and it's been a case of, more control. There's not been a 95th minute winner. There's not been a Darwin Nunez away at Nottingham Forest or anything like that.
Also because I went AWOL for 6 weeks, so I haven't seen all of these in person.
But it's tricky, isn't it? And that's probably a good thing that it's tricky.
It probably comes down to Leverkusen or United, doesn't it? I think I've said on this podcast before, I'm yet to see a complete 90 minutes from Liverpool. Like, they can turn it on when they need to. They can up the ante and get the results. And there have been some big moves, been some big performances in little spells. But we yet to see that complete 90 minutes. Manchester United away is probably what came closest to it. Yeah. Bayer Leverkusen's probably that statement result so far. But then the fact that Liverpool are doing this with 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. The fact that there are still levels to come. We're seeing them rise the levels in the games to get these results in the first place. And month's time, 2 months' time, it's the festive period, but then you're going to have Elliott back, Addison back, Jota back, Chiesa back. shaping up to be a really good situation for him to be in.
Somebody else will be injured by then, don't worry.
Probably someone else will be injured by then. I don't think anyone's got injured in the first round of internationals, so
yet.
far so good. But yeah, it's a really nice position for him to be in there.
Yeah, I think the only one that I'd add would be the Villa game, but part of that was what happened immediately before it and the circumstances and that kind of thing.
Like, I suppose you throw Brighton the comeback, but that's just 5 minutes, isn't it? Because of what is coming before. And it doesn't matter what we say here. For 2 weeks, Liverpool go and beat Man City, get a 8-point lead, 11-point lead, 10-point, whatever it could be. Yeah. That's going to be the favourite, isn't it? That's going to be the one we look back to. It's going to be like 2019-20. You get that 3-1 win over Man City. You build a big gap and you think, hello, we've got something here. And then you have Manchester United in January and then the fans can start to sing. Let's not get too carried away. But you are starting to see those little similarities where you think in back of your mind, could Liverpool do this? Like if City slip up, Arsenal slip up, they just got to hold their nerve. It's very early days. But for that gap to have already built up, it'd be daft to blink at it.
Yeah, just got to beat Southampton first and go from there. But a last question then from Sanjay before we move on to a couple of other topics. What's your favourite player outside of Liverpool in the Premier League who you'd like to see play for the Reds? Now, I've taken this to mean could be anyone, so I would go with someone like Rodri or Haaland, but you might also interpret that as maybe somebody a bit more realistic for Liverpool to pick up.
I'm not going to go for realistic, I don't think. I'll go for the dream one, and it would be easy to go Haaland, quality striker, best striker in the world. De Bruyne, probably best playmaker in European football, one of the very best players in the Premier League, or Rodri, as you said, just because he's such a good enforcer, the complete midfielder. But they're all that little bit older, so I've got to think of, you look at the Liverpool team, where is that gap? Where is the next player they need? And that brings you to Salah, and it brings you to Van Dijk, the long-term successors there. William Saliba, probably, for me, Arsenal. Yeah. He is the next one who's going to be the best defender in the world, isn't he, after Van Dijk? So that would be like for like. Obviously, it's never going to happen unless Arsenal fall apart completely. You look at Arsenal again, and Saka, it'd be such a great right winger to have as a Salah successor. Obviously, so unrealistic, but those are the ones you can really dream about. If you want to go a bit more realistic, it's hard to say because Liverpool don't go for the big names, do they? They go for those players that are younger who are going to get better and become the next big thing for them. Yep. So like Kirkers at Bournemouth, he's having a very good season. Got a couple of assists against Man City. We know Liverpool are going to be looking at left backs with Andy Robertson out of contract in 18 months. Whether Tsimikas and Robertson, one of them stays, one of them goes, whatever. He could be the next left back for Liverpool. He fits the right profile, attacking fullback. He's young, but then you can look at Wolves. Aït-Nouri, he's someone who fits that as well. And then it's just what happens with these contracts. Will Liverpool need to find their Van Dijk replacement now, or do they give him 2 years? Do they need to find a Salah replacement now, or do they give him 2 years? At least if Trent goes, you've got Conor Bradley there, and Gravenberch seems to have filled the number 6 hole for now. We'll see if they want someone alongside him to do it, but yeah, left back's probably that one for me.
Yeah, similar theme to a left back actually. I quite like Ryan Aït-Nouri at Wolves as well, similar to Kirkes. Possibly one of those that you could look to pick up at one point or another. But I think that's just about all the questions that we had in from Sanjay that we've gone through there. We'll come to some more questions as they come in on the live stream as we go along. We'll move on to the international break. You did touch on it a little bit earlier. Obviously, no injuries so far, but only a couple of Liverpool players have played up to this point. Probably the standout moment, really, was from Curtis Jones. I don't know if you watched the England game last night, Theo, but I've only seen the goal from Curtis Jones. That was pretty impressive, though.
I've watched it in bars around Liverpool, so not without commentary and not as good a view as you can hope for. But he was very impressive from what I saw, and it seems, doing all the reaction today from the pundits, the supporters, his teammates, best player on the pitch by a mile. He's just playing with so much confidence at the moment, and he's taken that onto the international stage. To pull off that goal, it is something special. Like, it's something that you do with your mates on the schoolyard or on the local field or something, isn't it? And he's gone and done his international debut to cap it off after a really good performance. And what I like about Curtis Jones this season is you can put him at number 10 and he's been great. You can put him in that deeper role and he's been great. It's been a long time coming for him to get that England debut. Like, he's had unfortunate injuries, Obviously didn't play in the last break because his missus was about to pop. And I know Arne Slot referenced that in his recent forms, partly due to becoming a dad, and maybe it's just a coincidence, but he has been amazing this past month. We've seen it before from him. Like, he had a really good run back end of 22, 23, wasn't it? And when he gets in the team, he is so good, and you can put him in a number of positions. It's just he always seems to get those niggling injuries at the wrong times. Touch wood, he doesn't get them this year. He's playing well. And at the start of the season, when Gravenberch was playing so well, it was him and two others. For me, it's now him and Jones and one other. And when you think that's against McAllister, Szoboszlai, £95 million of talent, and Curtis Jones is outshining them both, that's really incredible to see as well. He's got goals, he's winning penalties against Chelsea, he's getting assists, he can win the ball back. There was one against Villa, was it, where he has three players breathing down his neck. He turns all of them. He's really built. He's such a big midfielder now, and I don't think people quite realise that. He's good on the ball. He's just a real all-round performer. He's playing with a smile on his face. He's saying that in every single interview. He did that for England. This slower style of international play suits him, but we've been seeing it for Liverpool as well. You and me have been going to the academy for a number of years now. We're seeing him do that in the youth league for the under-21s, and it was just wait for him to get a run of games. You will see it for Liverpool first team. Cat's out of the bag. It's a bit late than we all expected, but yeah, we're seeing what a real talent Curtis Jones can be now.
Yeah, he's had to be patient, hasn't he, in his Liverpool career so far. He's had to be patient even this season. He got the little injury at the start and then had to work his way back into the team, but I think, like you say, he's one of the first names on the team sheet for the biggest games at the moment, at least. And the only thing that has ever held him back has been those little injuries at the wrong time and things like that. But if he can get over those, he is definitely a player that's got the ceiling to be in that Liverpool team week in, week out, to be a big part of it. He said himself during the summer that the fact that Jurgen Klopp had moved on and Arne Slot came in probably suits him. I think that was maybe misinterpreted by some people as a bit of a dig, but I think that was just, a classic case of him being really honest and really thinking about the game as well. He seems like a player who will really study and look at how he can improve himself and what he needs to do. You mentioned the youth games and the UEFA Youth League.
Oh, that was
this
incredible.
This is a very, very different Curtis Jones, though. It was an incredible Curtis Jones then, an incredible one now, but the pathway between those 2 points has been really interesting to follow as well. So as he approaches his peak years, I think it's probably fair to say that there's even more to come from him, but quite what that looks like, it could go one or two ways, I think.
Yeah, because like for the supporters that don't remember those youth league games or didn't see them, he was a left winger, wasn't he? He got was it 16 goals, 15 goals, 6 assists from 25 games for the 18s and 19s that year. Under Steven Gerrard, that is just insane. Like, whenever the youth league post clips of something, it's always, Curtis Jones did this in 17-18, because obviously they love to promote their success stories.
Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott.
Yeah, and it's like, well, that's it. These are the best teams in Europe, the best academies in Europe. These are the best players of those academies. And that was Curtis Jones. And it's just waiting for him to step up. And obviously, you can be exciting at youth level, scoring all the goals, getting all the assists, but you might not quite be in that role when you get in the first team. I've seen him come on as a sub, I suppose, at left wing a couple of times, but is very much be a central midfielder. And it's just, well, you can be a number 10, you can be a number 8. He's not quite got the hang of number 6 yet, but it doesn't look like we need him to be. But Jurgen Klopp said one of his biggest challenges was getting him to be able to defend, to get that awareness to his game. And that is something he's learned. That builds into what you said there about him studying the game, wanting to improve.
I think he almost went too far that way under Jurgen Klopp. And you sort of wanted to see a bit more of the freedom and the stuff that he's got, but it seems like he's come back the other way now, playing a little bit further forward. He's still got the defensive stuff, and he can run and he'll chase and he'll harry and do that stuff, but he can kind of do a little bit of everything, which is a bit like what you said before. He can play higher up, he can play deeper. That's only going to help him get more minutes as well in that Liverpool midfield.
It's like one of the stars of the Under-21s Euros, wasn't he, a couple of years ago, when Liverpool were seemingly scouting every single midfielder at that tournament, looking for the solution. And then it just happened, they already had the solution in Curtis Jones. You just had to be a bit patient for him. But when Liverpool have had a few injuries, the fact that Szoboszlai is not his best or McAllister's not his best, they can just put him in those two roles. It's great, isn't it? Yeah. And Slot said himself, I can probably play him anywhere at the moment. He's so confident. It's just a month, 6 weeks. A 6 week spell where he's been confident, he's in form. Now turn that into 3 months, turn that into 6 months. If we see that from Curtis Jones, it's just going to be an incredible year for him. Like, that England debut, like we said already, is a long time coming. You'd imagine he'll make his home debut against Finland on Sunday, is it? But he has got that potential to be one of the first names for club and country if he can keep it up. And like we're seeing the glimpses, he's got the potential to be like a match of the day player, a YouTube player, where you put those highlights compilations together and you're like, wow. But now we're starting to see those 90 minutes from him. It's just exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And fingers crossed he can remain consistent, remain fit for the next few weeks. If he does that, it's inevitable he's going to get minutes, whether he's the first name on the team sheet or the third or fourth. I noticed, obviously haven't watched it, but I noticed Alexis McAllister apparently didn't play particularly well for Argentina. They got beat, so maybe that is something.
He was as number 10 as well. It was a new role for McAllister, and it's something that I think we've all kind of wanted to see, and Slot hasn't been tempted to do yet. With just put Jones deeper. Let's see what McAllister can do as the number 10, because we've seen Szoboszlai there, we've seen Jones there. Yet to see Elliott there, really because of injury, even though he had such a great pre-season in the role. It's like, what can McAllister do? Because we're all so excited back end of last year when he's scoring worldies, getting involved further up the pitch, and he seems to be a little bit stuck between the two positions for me. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but he's not as mobile as a Curtis Jones, and he's like either too far forward or he's too defensive. He's still trying to get that balance right, though we know he's so good at finding those gaps, playing the through balls. So that's, for me, Jones is ahead of him in the pecking order at the moment. So maybe a change of role would unleash him, but it seems like he was pretty anonymous as the number 10 for Argentina last night as they suffered a shock defeat. But then he's not had a great season so far. It's not all his own fault, because he has struggled with injuries, and he seemed to be travelling all the way to Argentina and still having to play and train with those injuries, when he probably would have benefited from just saying, have this one off, stay at home, get right. When you get a little niggle in your system, how hard it is to overcome it, get back to your best. But he's still doing a job for Liverpool, even if he wasn't quite his best for Argentina.
Yeah, he just looks absolutely shattered to me. Every time I've watched him recently, he just looks like he needs 2 or 3 games off, and maybe that's where Curtis Jones or hopefully Harvey Elliott, we saw training with the under-21s earlier in the week, if they can both be fit for the next period of time. He's obviously going to want to play City, Real Madrid and all those games, but maybe the ones outside of that, maybe there can be a little bit more rotation around that. But the other player I wanted to mention as well was Caoimhin Kelleher, another big moment for him. I feel like I say the same thing all the time about him, really, in that he's unfortunate that he's got Addison ahead of him. You can understand, I think, why he possibly would have moved on if there was a genuine possibility of that being the case in the summer. The teams that came in for him, the money that was on the table wasn't
Turner in exchange
wasn't sufficient really for Liverpool to be tempted, which again is an understandable position for them to have taken. But it's getting to the point really with him where he just keeps performing, keeps producing, and at some point you'd imagine that a big enough club and a big enough offer would come in for him, because why wouldn't you if you were, I don't know, even a club as big as a Tottenham or someone like that.
We were saying Chelsea on Monday.
Yeah, why have they not come in for him in the past?
It's baffling, isn't it? Because there has been a lot of goalkeeper movements in the Premier League, probably in the last 2 seasons. And I think it's over the last 2 seasons, you're going, probably Kelleher's time to go now. Liverpool aren't going to be able to keep hold of him, not going to be able to keep him happy. He's won a League Cup, and he's gone and won a second League Cup. He needs games, and you're not going to get that on the bench. He doesn't have anything to prove as Liverpool's number 2 goalkeeper. You can give him credit because he hasn't rocked the boat or anything behind the scenes. He's just very honest when he's asked about it. He goes, I want to play. I want to be a first choice. I'm not going to do it here. They've just signed a goalkeeper. It's just a very difficult position for him to be in. But at least he's doing really well in this run in the team now. We know Alisson's a bit fragile. He's picking up injuries last season. This season, you wouldn't be surprised if he comes back and then gets another one springtime or whatever, and you turn to Kelleher again. But still very delicate for him. He's apparently made a really good penalty save for Ireland last night, getting them a vital win. I've seen quite a lot of praise for him. I think it was Kevin Doyle saying in 5 years he's going to be one of the top 2 goalkeepers in the world. That's quite the praise and tease. I'm not sure if I can go that far.
He wasn't even in the Ireland team until a few months ago. I mean,
and that was only because Gambazanu got injured. But he's taken his opportunities, and he's so calm. Like no setbacks seem to faze him. He just carries on with his game. He does make the occasional mistake, or maybe he's not as good quite on the ball as Addison. Like, he's not able to start the counter-attack with the throw as much, and his long kicking's not as accurate, but he's still confident on the feet. He can pass it around the back. He's very good shot stopping. You don't have that confidence in him necessarily when someone's one-on-one that, he's going to save this, but he's still a very, very good goalkeeper. He's just not the best goalkeeper in the world, and this brings me to a debate that's been going on in the Blue Half of our desk in the last couple of weeks. I think Editor Ian's probably been on about this as well with Sean Dyche, and it's Jared Branthwaite Why hasn't he been starting for Everton? Because he's the best player, 70 million defender. And it doesn't matter how good the form is of the players already in that place. Michael Keane, James Kartowski. If you've got that in reserve, you put it in. That's for me what the case with Alisson Becker is. As long as he's fit, if he's available, you put him in. It doesn't matter how well Kelleher's playing. And that's harsh on Kelleher, and that's something that he knows is the case. Arne Slot said it in a press conference. So to still perform when you know you're getting dropped as soon as Alisson Becker's back, that must be very hard to take. But fair play to him for handling it really well.
I think that's probably why he maybe ends up leaving next summer. I think that makes the most sense. I think by that point he'll only have a year left on his contract. I think off the top of my head, obviously they've signed Mamadashvili. That sort of feels like the long-term succession to Alisson, as you say. So maybe that does make sense to do that. Just quickly before we move on to David Coote and do a few minutes on him, a question from Julian in the comments, similar to one we had a little bit earlier on. Would you rewind to the start of the season now if you could have Jurgen Klopp back and he hadn't left?
No, I don't think so. When it's going so well with Arne Slot, why rock the boat? Like, Jurgen Klopp is the past. I think it helped that Liverpool had such a long time to adjust to the fact that he was leaving. You could enjoy him, you could celebrate him, but you could also look ahead to the future. Like, the back end of last season, you were ready for him to go. It was a very long farewell, and then it's right, look to the future now. Make sure Liverpool are in the best state possible. The players are ready for the future, whoever's coming in, and then go and attack it, go and achieve what you can. We all expected this to be that transitional year, settle for top 4 in a cup run. So far it's exceeded that. So yeah, rather than hark back to the past and Jurgen Klopp and what he could have done, he could have got a second league title, he could have got a second Champions League. Just focus on what's there in front of you, what Arne Slot can achieve.
Yeah, he looks like he's enjoying himself anyway. He's got himself a new job. He's been playing paddle. He's been doing all these things.
Yeah.
Let's leave him to that.
What I'm interested to see though is in his last press conference. Remember, he said he'd come back after the November international break. Now, it's very literal to say, oh, we might be back next week. But with that Red Bull job starting in January, if he wants to come to a Liverpool game after the November international break before he starts, he's got a very limited window. So do we see him at like a Man City, a Real Madrid? Or is he going to be there with the away fans at Southampton in the League Cup quarterfinals?
To be fair, I don't know how much work there's going to be with this Red Bull job. It sounds a bit like he's going to be jetting around the world doing various bits, but we'll see what happens. Let's move on to a slightly trickier and more difficult topic to talk about in David Coote. I think the last time I did this podcast actually was when the VAR stuff happened with Luis Diaz last season.
Yeah. I only bring you on for the officials.
Exactly. Only here for the refereeing controversies. For anyone that doesn't know, I do a bit of refereeing. I've got a bit of a background in that as well. So it is an interesting one for me to talk about. I'm going to let you do most of the talking, though.
How diplomatic of you.
Yeah, I mean, where do you start with this? I suppose it was just an insane lack of judgment to allow yourself to be filmed in those circumstances. And I don't know, it just seems like a completely unnecessary distraction. We're talking about referees again. As much as we have to talk about referees, every referee will tell you we don't want to be talking about the referees. The referees don't want to be the centre of attention. But unfortunately, an incident like this, it's inevitable that we are going to be talking about it, and not least because it's an international break and it's basically filled the void for 2 weeks, unfortunately.
Well, let's be honest. If those videos hadn't come out, we'd probably still be talking about David Coote, in the sense that he's very, very lucky that Darwin Núñez scores off Salah getting fouled.
The VAR would have.
The VAR would have intervened, but the fact that he was adamant it wasn't a foul, that was baffling in itself. And there have been a number of puzzling decisions from him over the years, whether it's VAR or as the referee when it's Liverpool games. But you don't think anything of it. He's just not the best referee in Europe, in the country. It's no bad thing. You'll know how hard it is as a referee going up that pathway. There are going to be some that aren't as good as others. It's natural, same as it is for footballers. But then all this comes out, and there's not necessarily anything particularly wrong with what he says in the video. I'm going to finish that. That can't be taken out of context. That doesn't go anywhere else.
No.
Because he says Liverpool weren't very good. And we believe that video was on the day of the 7-2. 100% fair. They weren't very good the day of the 7-2 against Aston Villa.
Still very, very stupid to allow yourself to be filmed.
It's stupid to allow yourself to be filmed. I'd imagine he doesn't remember being filmed for whatever reason. I'll let people speculate on that themselves. Then he insults Jurgen Klopp. And to an extent, that is understandable. Like, he's referenced the clashes he's had with Klopp when the Burnley game, and if you're fourth official, and we know Klopp was like in your face of the officials. We've had ones against Tottenham where he's pulled his hamstring celebrating in the face of officials. If you're an official, you probably don't like Jurgen Klopp. Same as supporters, players, managers don't like referees. It works both ways. What the big issue with the video is he brings Klopp's nationality into it, and then the guy alongside him obviously says some quite hard things about Scousers. And you put all that together, it's like, well, we can't just brush over this now. You've said one thing, so we're now going to have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb. And to be stupid enough to have it filmed, but then all these other videos come out, and it's like, well, this isn't a one-off. Like, there is a lot that seems to be coming out here about David Coote, and it's not now a case of can he referee in the Premier League again, it's can he referee again. Like, I did John Aldridge's column at the start of the week, and he was saying all referees should say who they support. That would help solve these issues, all the accusations of corruption, because if you know David Coote supports Notts County, you're not going to be concerned about him being in charge of those sorts of games.
I think that was a plan already, I think, for that to be published. It is obviously already known by the PGMOL, but I think that is going to be made known. But then
it's not a resolution.
It's a case of whether you believe that everyone in Manchester's an Altrincham fan or whatever.
That is something Aldo said himself, actually. But the knock-on from that is it isn't just who you support, it's the rivals of you support. And then it's not the bitter local rivals or your title rivals, it's every knock-on effect.
Yeah.
Like, say Nottingham Forest, for whatever reason, are in the top four at the end of the season, they suddenly become a rival, and every game means something. David Coote, now, like Carragher said on the overlap this week, we can't referee Everton because he's been put himself in that position with that video where they're saying things about Scousers, and it's just a knock-on, it goes all the way. But then you see these other videos that I'm just going to allude to rather than directly say what they are. I'm sure if people care enough, they'll have seen them. That authority he's got, that respect he's got is gone. Like, a manager can say something about a referee and he'll get fined. He'll get suspended, whatever. He has authority of his team, but he doesn't have that authority in the match. The referee is supposed to be someone above that, and Coote has just blown that out the water. I'm comparing it to, say, you're at school, a kid calls a teacher something, slap on the wrist, detention, suspension. A teacher calls a kid something, gets sacked. If you're in that position of power, you've got that authority. You cannot lose that position of authority, otherwise there is no way back. With David Coote here, there is no way back. Like, he's allowed himself to be filmed. He said these things. You could maybe brush over it if it wasn't this, then this, then this, then this. But now it's all added up, and I can only see it having an unhappy ending for him.
Yeah, I mean, the investigation into him is ongoing. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, but it's hard to look beyond that being the case, isn't it? I just think it's a bad look, really, for the whole of the Premier League referees. Whoever's refereeing Liverpool next, that's going to be a conversation. It's obviously not going to be David Coote, but I would imagine that they possibly will put one of the more experienced officials on that, just because the spotlight's going to be on there. If there's a big controversial decision, it's going to be talked about a lot. And I think, as someone who referees, even just at a very low level compared to this, it just feels like it's another stick to beat referees with. Yeah. It's another thing that's going to add to the conspiracy theories. We've seen, countless things on social media. There's kind of a feeling almost that automatically whatever the referee does these days is obviously wrong or is obviously corrupt in some way, which I think we've kind of got to such a level now where I'm not quite sure what the solution is, but this has just sort of blown it to another level and another proportion again, has made it a little bit more difficult for everybody across the board, really, when, as you say, you've got to have those elements of trust within officials. You've got to have that seems to have been eroded, and a video coming out where he does something that, to be honest, when I first viewed it, I just assumed that it was fake and it wasn't real. It just that was the automatic assumption. Well, of course that can't be the case. Nobody would be stupid enough to do that, but obviously one person does, and it opens then the question, rightly or wrongly, of whether there's other referees in that position, or whether there's other people in similar positions. It just feels like it's going to be even more of a conversation now moving forwards, and we've kind of spiralled to a point where I'm not quite sure how we get out of it.
Well, it's opened up multiple conversations, because it's firstly, has David Coote made poor decisions against Liverpool deliberately? Then it's opening up that wider, referees are human, they've got their feelings against players, managers. Does that influence it overall? Is there corruption? But then it also comes on to welfare as well, because David Coote, obviously, he's done things he shouldn't here. He's been filmed under the influence on some occasions, and it's like, well, why are you in that situation? Is this because you're struggling with the publicity, with the backlash? Is this how you cope? Just opens up something completely different there as well. And then it's, well, you need to support him. There needs to be better support in place for referees. Like, if something bad happens with a player, like we've seen it before, Luis Suarez, for example, biting someone, Liverpool fan base still had his back. They still got that support there. Whereas a referee must be the loneliest job in football, because everyone
Fourth
is telling
official,
you,
definitely.
everyone is telling you you're wrong, in much worse phrases than that. They're on your back. And how do you get out of that? Like, if you've got that personal feeling because a manager's been in your face all day, to just switch that off, and then you ref them again, and you've got to switch it off still. They're only human. They're going to have those issues. Like, we know Klopp had those issues with them. Like, he had a couple of officials he'd always name as not being particularly fond of. Like, they're human. They're going to have those relationships, and they're not going to be positive. They are going to be negative. It's football. It's what happens. But yeah, there's going to have to be a complete overview here, looking at where they've gone wrong, where they've gone right, because we've been complaining about the level of officiating in English football for a long, long time now. They've got technology coming in, and that seems to make it more complicated. Yeah. They just need to find a way to get it right. But are we too far gone now? Is there just no way? Like, is the only solution going full AI, because then they don't have emotions? But yeah, there's always going to be something to complain about.
I think that the VAR point is an important one, isn't it? Because that does seem to have made it worse. There was, for whatever reason, an assumption that that was a machine that would come in and just fix everything, which clearly was never going to be the case. It's probably put more scrutiny on referees in certain points. I've seen, people complaining and sort of discussing the mic'd up thing that Howard Webb does with Michael Owen, or Leon Osman as it was on the latest one. Things like that automatically, I think, are assumed to be a negative thing or a bad thing. And I know Howard Webb obviously had to kind of brush over to a certain extent what had happened with the David Coote stuff, because it was, a programme that came out pretty much as soon as that had happened.
As it was happening, wasn't it?
But,
yeah.
At the same time, I think it's not a bad idea to try and be more transparent, or to try and explain why these things are happening. If they don't do it, they get criticised because they're hiding something and they're not letting people see the audio and seeing the process. If they do it, people then are not happy with the process, or say, well, we know you've made a mistake because we've seen it already. You almost can't win in that scenario. It just seems like I'm not quite sure, I suppose, how you fix that, and that's more what I'm bothered about, really. Obviously, the Coote story is big. Refereeing generally is often a story, much more often than what we would want it to be, but I'm more interested in the fix and the solution, and to be honest, I've got no idea what that looks like.
No, it's a massive dilemma now, and they've got to start first with David Coote, resolve that, do the investigations, see what's happened, what needs to happen, and then you take it wider. Like, we're still waiting, what is it, for the semi-AI offsides to come in. That changes things. You look at VAR, and it seems to vary week on week. Like, we can see Jota get taken out. He's not last man, but then Saliba is in the Arsenal-Bournemouth game. There's just no consistency there in the officiating. And there's so many issues here. And the fact that it is a story, it's just hard to stomach. You don't want it to be the deciding factor in matches. You don't want to know the referees' names. You don't want them to be having big decisive stay on matches. You want the players to be doing it. And the fact that it is coming out here, that's not even a blessing, is it? But the fact that all this big headlines from David Coote is his behaviour off the pitch rather than on it, as long as what he's done off the pitch proves to not have impacted what's happened on the pitch. He hasn't let it influence his decisions or anything, and there's no suggestion he has at this point. But then we'll see what comes from these.
Certainly not consciously, but potentially there's then the question, which you can never prove one way or the other, of unconsciously is there something, or whatever it might be. There's always going to be those questions, and again, there's always been those questions about what if a referee supports a team who's involved in a relegation battle or a title race, indirectly does something. I think there was one at the back end of last season. I think I'm right in saying that Jared Gillett isn't allowed to do Liverpool games because I think he was potentially a Liverpool fan when he was younger, but then he's allowed to do Arsenal matches or things like that. So it's all a little bit tricky. The other point I wanted to mention before we finish, really, was I've seen loads and loads of people say two things this week. One is that you've got to get rid of PGMOL and start again, in which case, who starts it again? What happens next? The other thing as well that I've seen lots of people say this week is about, let's just get loads of foreign referees, which I think ignores two things. One, the referees in other countries are not necessarily any better than the ones that we have in England. I think people who just assume that that is the case maybe don't watch enough
We're
football
all piling back to cleaner, aren't we?
in other countries to necessarily make that judgment accurately. I just don't think that that's the case. But even if it was the case, why should the Premier League, as the richest league, have all of the best referees from France or Spain or Germany? You know, it feels a little bit similar to me to, you know, people don't like the fact that Saudi Arabia have got the most money and they've distorted the transfer market. Well, in the same vein, why should the Premier League just be able to spend whatever it likes on referees and bring in the best from France? Why shouldn't France have that referee that, you know, the Premier League might want to bring in and things like that? So even in that sense, I don't think there's really a solution there. I mentioned Jared Gillett is one that has come in from Australia. That's different because he decided to move to this country, and you know his family now live over here and all the rest of it. He made that decision himself rather than, you know, being enticed into it, you know, for financial reasons or whatever it might be. But
Is it still a rule that you have to be domestic? Like, obviously, you do the European games, you go wherever, but for leagues, isn't it? The European referees have to be based there, they have to live there, they have to already come from there.
I think potentially it would be the case just in terms of sort of employment laws, in terms of where you're based and that kind of thing. But I just the point I was trying to make really was that I don't really see that is a solution. Even if it was a solution, I don't think that's really something that, you know, the Premier League can take the moral high ground by just robbing everybody else's.
How the FA have approached the England national team and coaching and everything, it's like, we want to challenge for trophies, get the best team out there, start to play like we think we can play. And it's, well, we go to grassroots level, improve the coaching, work your way up. And now we're seeing a lot of very talented young England players coming through. And there's been that knock on now. They're in the first team. You're seeing Curtis Jones. We need to do the same for refereeing. We need to get young people interested in refereeing and improve the coaching and the training. But it takes time. And in the meantime, there will be mistakes. Yeah. And when you want the referee to be the person you don't notice on the matches, all David Coote's managed to do here is make sure there's more scrutiny.
And what I would say about David Coote is that he was very highly regarded by UEFA and the PGMOL.
It's not supporters.
It's not the case that, you know, he had come through and had been, you know, promoted unnecessarily. He was definitely involved in the Olympics. I think he was involved in the gold medal match in the summer, possibly as the referee, maybe as the VAR, but certainly in some capacity. You know, people like Stuart Atwell, Chris Kavanagh, Michael Oliver obviously is the top one, and Anthony Taylor as well across Europe. You know, people look across the Champions League and think, oh, the referees everywhere else are better. But, you know, I think it's Simon Marciniak, the Polish referee, that often gets praise whenever he does a Champions League game. There's a guy in France whose name I can't remember as well now, but they are not necessarily any better than the very top level of the Premier League. It's just people don't watch them as often.
It's just what you see, isn't it? Like, if we take it at VAR, it's not been a very easy transition, but we see everything wrong with it. We see all the mistakes and go, it doesn't do that on the continent. But that's because when you hear about it on the continent, you're only hearing about the occasional mistake.
And you don't support the team necessarily.
So you don't have that emotion on it. So it's just because you're more privy to it. You see it week in, week out. And officiating just isn't good enough. And it hasn't been for a long, long time now. But then how do you encourage someone to sign up for a job where they are going to get that abuse from absolutely everyone? And they're not going to get praise for doing well. If they do well, no one says anything. That's the sign of a good official, that you don't get noticed. But you've just listed off so many names now, and the fact they are becoming household names, that they are appearing on Sky Sports or whatever. You've got them when they retire doing the rounds on, not selling the stories, but, you know, doing the dinners.
Yeah, things like that don't
Or
help, I think.
they go in on Sky, BT, whatever, being the referee experts. Or you go Nottingham Forest as a consultant. And it's just making mistakes time and time again, and that's all anyone remembers from for. You don't want them to be celebrities. It's not a popular job. It's just very hard to get that balance right, isn't it? Because there's no respect there anymore. They don't have that authority anymore. Like, you see this with David Coote, and you've got these suspicions about other officials. Like when you've got some of them coming out and going, "Oh, I was told by whoever to not go to the VAR screen." Who was that? You'll maybe know that one.
It was Mike Dean who
said
said
that.
Mike Dean said he didn't advise Anthony Taylor to go to the screen because he didn't want to embarrass him.
So yeah, you've got all of this, and they're influencing stuff, and it's not just clean football, making the best decision, making the correct decision. It varies game after game. Yeah, it just needs something to get that consistency back. So we're not talking about it week after week, but we're too far gone now.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. I think it will be the case, won't it, that we are going to be talking about this over the next few weeks. I'm sure it won't be the last time that this comes up on the Blood Red podcast, but that will be for today. We will draw a line under it. We will move on.
Just what we wanted going into the weekend, wasn't it? A nice lengthy discussion about referees.
I very much enjoyed the first part where we answered some questions and spoke about Curtis Jones and Caoimhin Kelleher a lot more than the second part. But I'm sure it's a big topic, isn't it? This week we had to touch upon it, and I'm sure we will do so again. But yes, that'll do us, I think, for now. Thank you very much for watching along and for listening as well. That's been Friday's Blood Red podcast.